I'd like to start with territorial land acknowledgement from where I'm presenting, which is Hamilton in Ontario, Canada. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, settlers, partners, and caretakers, and so that we can work to dismantle the systemic racism that is both historically and presently part of our society. So welcome, everybody. Nice to see folks here. I'm going to introduce myself and then I'll ask Anne to introduce herself. My name's Cathy Paton, and right now I am working partly at McMaster University. My work is a process of combining social work and the arts. So I'm a social arts facilitator, researcher, and I do a lot of different practices with faculty and students. And it's really relational work, and you'll get a taste of it today a little later in the presentation when we do an exercise to see kind of what it is I'm about. Anne, do you want to?
Sure. My name's Fudge Schormans, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work at McMaster. And I'm joining Cathy in this because when Cathy was a doctoral student, arts-based research is something that I'm quite engaged in, and also see the value of arts, bringing the arts into education, into teaching. And so there is a doctoral class that I teach, which is about looking at research for social change. And I brought Cathy into that many, many years ago to do some of the amazing stuff that she does as a way of supporting, social work doctoral students in sort of understanding primarily, the things that kind of happen when they're doing research with other people, right? And really getting at a better understanding, a different way of understanding some of those relational processes. So we've worked together many times now, and we're both very, very interested in how all of this happens. So that's why I'm here. So nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Anne. So today we're going to talk briefly about one of the exercises that we have used in the classroom in order to bring attention to the ways in which we relate to one another. So we're going to talk about this exercise to help us understand the ways in which improv exercises make relating, so our intentions and actions and movements and words in relation to the people around us, available to us in ways that they are usually not. So what is improvisation? Improvisational theater involves creating scenes, characters, relationships, and complete shows without a script. In the way they enter the stage, the artist's first spoken words, gestures, body language work to establish a reality in which they can play. They create identities, relationships, locations, and motivations. Their emotional and physical responses and interactions build upon one another and constitute one another, and scenes are elaborated or undone, identities confirmed or challenged, all in real time. So trust, risk, and awareness are amongst many of the relational pieces that are required in this art form. So that's a key piece, is this requirement. They're required on a functional level in order to make the art form work. So not just to make it good or to make it something people want to see, but to actually make it work at all. These relational pieces are key. And so that to me is the really exciting part about this. So in this work, the work that we're going to do today, we use improvisational exercises. So they're really different than scenes or shows. So if you hear improv, you might think of comedy. And in the North American context, we often might think about Whose Line Is It Anyway, or Second City, places that really focus on the kind of game aspect and the comedy aspect, but this is different. We're focusing on exercises that are about gaining skills that allow us to improvise. So skills that improvisers need, but that also work out to be very helpful in bringing our attention to the quality of our interactions with others. So we're going to try out an exercise to see what this is about, to see what this is like, and to help us get an idea of these pieces of relating that I'm talking about. And I'm not going to tell you how it's going to do that, because this is a different experience for everybody, and the pieces of relating that stick out or that occur to people are always different for different people. So before we start this exercise, I want to say this is usually an exercise that we do in person. And so the exercise generates really different stuff in person than it does virtually, but we'll still see what happens for us today. The other thing I want to say is this is a very participatory exercise. So I would ask, if you're not feeling up for participating, the exercise really only works, and it really needs you too. So if it's not something that you're feeling comfortable being involved, then it's probably not the best session in this moment to be in. And I'll leave that up to you. So I will ask you if you can turn on your cameras and if you can turn on your microphones. And to be in the gallery mode so that you can see everybody who's here in the space that we're sharing space with. And eventually so that we can hear everyone that we're sharing space with. Okay.
Right.
So we'll give it a go. We're going to get started. So how this is going to work is if everyone can position themselves in front of their camera so that you can see your own hand on your chest. So over your heart or the other side, whichever side works. And we need to be able to see that also. So we can just take a minute and get comfortable with that. That's great. We don't have to be able to see like the whole hand if it's not working for you, but just that we can see it. Great. Okay, wonderful. So what we're going to do is we're going to start tapping. So just tap your own body. Yeah. And we don't have to be tapping in sync. Just get comfortable. So this is a motion that we're going to keep using throughout this exercise. So find a way to be comfortable so that you can keep doing this and you can sustain it. And I want to also say that this exercise, this is about the most I'm asking for. So in terms of, it's not a very onerous or risky exercise. It's really low key. All right, that's wonderful. So we're going to continue tapping. And I invite you to notice how you're feeling in this moment doing this. Just noticing for yourself how that feels. Notice where your breath is in your body. And I invite you to notice also who you're sharing this space with. To look at one another, to notice who you're sharing with and who is also sharing with you in this moment. So I am going to give the instruction to stop and to start, and we're going to do that together. So we'll continue tapping, and I'll say stop, start. Yeah, that's great. Stop, start. Okay, wonderful. Stop, start. Okay, so I'm going to stop us for a moment. This is great. So the next piece, I'm going to ask someone to volunteer to give us the stop and the start. So since there's just a few of us, we can do this verbally. Does anyone want to volunteer to do our stop and start?
I can volunteer. It's okay.
All right, great. So Carmen, great, thank you. Okay, so we'll all begin tapping. And Carmen, when you're ready, you can give us our stop.
Stop. Start. Stop. And start.
That's great, Carmen, thank you. Okay, so, and I'll ask for one more volunteer. Can I get another volunteer to stop and start us?
Surely.
All right,
I'm happy to do that.
thank you. Okay, so let's begin tapping.
Yeah. Stop. And start. Stop. And start. And stop. And start.
Great. Okay, this is wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna pause for a moment. Thank you, Renee. And next, we're going to do a round. I'm going to ask someone to volunteer, and this time we're going to only have the stop. So as a group, we're going to find our start together. So what that'll look like is maybe someone starts, maybe we all start at once, but as soon as you see it, we're all going to start together. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So can I get a volunteer to do our only the stop?
I can do.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll start our tapping.
Stop.
It is.
Stop.
Oh, yeah.
Stop.
Got it, yeah. I'm always afraid of deleting things. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so thank you. So I'll pause it one more time, and then our last round, we're not going to have any verbal instructions. So we're going to find our stop and our start together. And I invite you to really jump on it. So what I mean by that is, as soon as you see something, we're going to try and bring our energy and our awareness to this and our intention to both the stop and the start as best we can. And we'll see how coordinated we can get ourselves with all the ins and outs of this virtual space. Okay, so let's begin and we'll see where this takes us. All right, and I'm going to close the exercise there. Thank you for participating, first of all. And well, I'm just so happy that you were able to be here with me in this and try that out. So I want to ask you a few questions about the experience, because a lot of this exercise, the other chunk of it, is about how you receive it, how you reflect on it, and what it means to you. So if I can ask you your initial responses or reactions to what you noticed about either yourself, the group, yourself in the group, just what you noticed.
Yes. I felt an immediate need of synchronizing with others. I looked at Carmen when she started, and I had to get the same rhythm because it was very disturbing if not. But I couldn't follow the same rhythm from all of them, so I have to choose one and then to get this rhythm. I think that gave the immediate connection to one person more than others. And I think if we do it just as if we are in a concert, we start clapping, all of us, but suddenly we fall into synchronized clapping. I think the same thing would do, I assume.
So you feel it's a natural, the synchronization is kind of a natural piece of what happens.
I think it makes us connect that we do the same thing.
Thank you, Renee. Interesting.
Yeah, I had a similar sensation. You know, the idea that when it was before we kind of seemed to have a common rhythm, it's as if we were kind of fine-tuning our instruments somehow. You know, it's like, you know, when an orchestra starts and you hear the like people trying their instruments individually, and then they kind of attune to do something where everybody kind of puts its beat, but it sounds together harmonically. So,
Mm.
I mean, the analogy is coming up now. But then again, you know, when you, after some time, then you kind of, because it's a game and you know that things are going to be changing, I started to kind of be curious about, you know, when someone will break the rhythm, or whether I would dare to break the rhythm, or, you know, it's this idea of the moment of change. So change and stability, change and stability.
Thank you. That's so interesting. All these different pieces occur to people, right? It takes on different shapes. Anyone else initial reactions or responses to what you noticed?
Can I say something?
Yes.
Actually, my initial response was a little different. You know, initially, when we first started doing the exercise, I could feel the tension, so to say. But, you know, after 2 rounds, I was feeling as in I was in sync with myself and with others. So, and I could actually feel that the tension reducing. So, yeah, that's what I felt.
Ah, that's so interesting, eh? The synchronicity kind of easing the tension and connecting us at the same time. So neat. So when we've done this exercise in the classroom, we do it walking around or moving how people are able to move around. And so there is a physical stop that you can really see and feel, and almost a lift to the start. So there's a very visceral piece to that that's really neat to experience. And when we've asked students about what they've noticed about this, some of the reactions are about leadership and the kind of, although someone might be in charge of the stop and the start, that they're also counting on people and needing people to stop and needing to trust that that will happen. So that kind of interdependence comes up, that it's not merely I know what it is to be in charge and I know what it is to follow, but that those things are messier and a little more blurry than we might assume. So I find that a really interesting piece, and making the links to power, and how, when we're working with others, paying attention to that kind of power and what that could shift while we're working with others. And did you want to speak to any of your insights from classroom or otherwise about this exercise?
First, one observation I had in terms of this particular exercise right now, which given doing it virtually isn't something that I noticed, I don't think, in the same way when we would do it live. So I mean, as you talked about how with the start, when you're doing it live, there's like a bit of a lift to starting again. But what I found, I saw it once and then I watched for it elsewhere. So, and I caught it in myself too, is that in doing this, I would find that as soon as somebody said stop, right, I was catching myself holding my breath. And when they said start, I took deep breaths, and I noticed a couple other people did the same thing. When it started again, I was like this, right? And so it was, I just found that really interesting, because it sort of looked and felt to me, as somebody who's done it before in person, it felt a little bit different, right? So it's like this, this really just sort of like waiting in anticipation, kind of the tension, I think that, Speedy, you were talking about perhaps, right? So, and how then with the synchronization happening, that wasn't happening so much anymore, right? So I think people were kind of getting into that kind of groove. But I think that, some of what you're talking about, Cathy, in terms of doing this and things we've heard from the class as well, is just, I think for some people, it is a real eye opener in terms of the importance of not only paying attention, but of how we're paying attention, right? So when you're thinking about, we're in social work, for example. So when you're thinking about your engagement with other people, with communities, right? Things like that, how important it is to actually really be present and be fully present in these moments. And right. And so by taking that kind of, put in the position in this exercise where you really are paying attention in a different way, like just wholeheartedly, whole body, just really paying attention, I think it kind of really brings us different idea to how you are with people. And students have talked about, sitting in offices or sitting around tables, and how it just felt different to be doing sort of like this movement thing in terms of kind of, and maybe not articulating that very clearly, but it just felt really different in terms of attending much more with your whole self. Do you know what I mean? Which I think adding that element of movement perhaps seems to do. Not that we should all go into our interviews and start doing this, although you never know, it's actually quite calming. And over the years, I've come to learn that actually this is kind of nice, right? But I think there is something to it that you may not get, right? In terms of thinking about, when you teach people in social work, for example, about relating, this isn't the kind of thing that actually tends to get covered. And so these exercises are really kind of interesting in that way, right? Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. Yes, and something I've noticed too is that is often something that comes up is assumptions about ways that we do things, that that students are often find themselves saying, "Oh, I thought I always did this, but then somehow I ended up doing this." And so kind of having these pieces, and I often refer to them as relational pieces, the things about how we are with one another, have those things kind of disrupted a bit and therefore made more available, so we can look at them and reflect on them and chat about them, talk about them, and see what that means for us. So I know I know I have a timer here. My timer just keeps disappearing.
Oh, yeah, just a minute. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to invite further reflection because I'd love to chat with folks about this if they have any other thoughts or maybe links to work that you're doing. So I really invite you that if you'd like to chat further about it, and if you'd like to chat in the group, I know it's a very small group, but I'm happy to be contacted via email to chat further and discuss what this looks like in different kinds of work, because I love this work, and I find it in different ways. It's really interesting and meaningful for people. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I really hope to hear from you more, because I'd love to hear about your experience more too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy and Anne.